Okay, in this video, I'd like to continue where I left off in the last video and wrap this whole thing up on how they did the disappearance of MH370. We're going to continue on with what Eric Dollard is saying and then finish up with what Steinmetz and Maxwell say. So let's continue. Okay, all this stuff is right in plain sight. It's right in front of your face, but if you don't go fishing and looking for the clues, you won't find them. So it's part of the game. It's like the game Go Fish. So that's why they're calling it the goldfish. So it's all to do with the Fibonacci, the golden ratio, and the anti-golden ratio and the space between. So we're gonna wrap this whole thing up with how they're doing the blast. And they're saying nothing beats the blast. This is what Dollard's talking about. It's talking about from taking something that's like a jet, disappearing it, and then tunneling it back out the other end. So this is from Dollard, the power of the ether. Okay, he says that the ether adds to the mass of the object when rotated faster and faster in space. The matter of the physical object is extended through space and becomes one with the ether. Need to create a magnetic field of equal potential so that the magnetic lines of force don't pull into it. You have to remove the magnetic lines of force by depolarizing it. The electric field is a combination of the electric and the dielectric. And that's where everybody got everything confused, said Steinmetz in the early 1900s, is they didn't understand that concept, that there's two components to electricity, and you can't have it without just having one. There's dielectricity and magnetism, and it has to be in a geometric form. So what Dollard is pointing out here, and they call it lines of force with the magnetism, but that's not how it's working. So in this condition here, you see all the magnetic lines of force, so-called, being removed to where you have a zero in the system and it's anti-grav. So it nullifies and counterbalances out everything. So this is where you get into the dimension of counterspace. So like I said, you got two dimensions to work with, just like this magnet, this ring magnet shows you here. On the outside, you got space, which is magnetism and all the light. And in the dead center of this thing, there is no magnetism, there's no light, it's a zero. It's complete dielectricity, it's counterspace, it's the other dimension. There's no time, no space, zero rotation, zero frequency, zero modulation, no wave component. Or in electromagnetism, you'd have that wave component. It's not playing that same game right there. So what's going on is you have to think about it like this when you're thinking about this dimension of counterspace. Because it's not the same as electromagnetism, it's the opposite. Counterspace, there's a slope ratio of harmonics. It's 2 to 3. To where you would have a transverse slope of 1 to 4 harmonic ratio. Spatial harmonics occur in aromatic multiples, where counterspace harmonics occur in geometric divisions. Harmonics become lower in frequency. In counterspace, harmonics become higher in frequency aromatically in space. One dimension in space with 3 coordinates. This is how they're talking about it. So with Tesla's deal, it's high voltage, low current. And that's what he's doing. Tesla's creating that differential by having a high, a low, and then he's extracting from the center. So that's the same thing that you're doing with this whole deal, is you're having a high with the magnetism, a positive, you're having a plane of inertia or the event horizon, and then you're having the dielectricity, the dead center, that would be your negative. That would be your dip, or something that's like deleted. So Um, what Eric Dollard is stating that the electric companies know all about this stuff because they actually use it in their system. So on your power line transmission system that you see that's running your house, they're running this thing called synchronous condenser. So the electric companies are using free energy in their system. It's like a cosmic oscillation that doesn't register on equipment. This is called a synchronous condenser. It uses this energy out of the ether or the dielectricity or counterspace. So this is used in power transmission. A synchronous condenser was built by Steinmetz and is a dynamo motor, a synchronous motor that it's a dyno motor, a synchronous motor that is submerged in hydrogen gas. The hydrogen is used to cut the windage and to cut the heat. The motor only connects to itself electrically. So that's the key. That's this whole Tesla monopolar system. Okay, so this is two very important diagrams to show you here to understand this whole white hole, black hole phenomenon thing in the space and counter space and how this whole thing was able to happen. Okay, through the synchronous parameter variation, this motor becomes a generator by working its own phases inside and supplies all the magnetism for the system to keep the transmission lines magnetized. In between the synchronous condenser and the substation is where it's located. So that's where it is. The space between the wires is magnetized. And here's your diagram. This is what it's like looking down the end of a power line. So this is the electric field of a conductor, to where you have your radial lines of force, and then you have your circumferential lines that are the magnetic, is how they call it here. They exist at right angles to one another. So here's the whole deal. In understanding this whole thing with the black hole, the white hole. So you have your white hole here, you have your black hole when we get to this. But you're looking down the end of your power line transmission line, and this is what's going on. This is key to understanding this, is that they always intersect at 90-degree right angles. So what they're showing you here is exactly what I'm showing you here with this levitating pencil, is that it's using that 90-degree major right angle right there as part of this. See, it's all about the geometry. And that's how you're getting this effect to occur. It's no different than your power line. So this whole thing is, there's this condition where the dielectric lines meet the magnetic lines, is where the electromagnetic energy flowing into or out of the paper parallel to the axis of the wire. At that crossing point, we call that unit the Planck, or in quantum is the photon, which we know is complete something different. So the electric field of a circuit, okay, this is the power line deal. This is what they're showing you here. And this is very, very important. This comes from Steinmetz. So the electric field of a circuit, this is how you understand the black hole, white hole thing, and how they're doing this whole thing. The system traps the electric field by bounding the ether between the wires. Radial lines of force are attempting to pull the wires together. This is what's happening in your power transmission lines that are powering your house. The magnetic lines are attempting to fill the space between and push them apart. So that's the whole thing. And that's how it's all working, is just like this. What they're doing to cause this blast to happen is they're building up the energy, and just like a capacitor, they're building it up and building it up and building it up and storing it, and then it blasts. So it's no different than what I'm saying about the higher, as you increase the energy, the smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. So as you increase energy, the smaller your space gets, and the higher your energy gets. So it's like pulling back a string on a bow. You would keep pulling until you get to a point where you can't pull back anymore, and then you release it, and that's when you get your faster than light or this blasting effect to occur. Okay, to be able to open up that black hole, and then the whole deal happens. So at a certain stress point into the dielectric called the voltage, and a certain stress point in the magnetic called the amperage, the two forces counterbalance each other and no force appears on the wire. This is called natural impedance in the system. This is what you're having here. This is a condition where it's at rest, it's at zero. So in Maxwell's notebook, there's a drawing of the ether. It's a honeycomb-shaped, six-pointed hexagonal fibrous cell, like an atom. Maxwell, he points out that this is his deal. So he says particles of electricity that are elastic to compression and distortion. The connection between the cells and the particles is the cell walls. He says there's perfect rolling without slipping. In rotation, the medium exerts stress equal to hydrostatic pressure combined with longitudinal tension along the lines of axis of rotation. Maxwell says if there are two similar systems, one of magnets, electric current, and bodies capable of magnetic induction, and the second composed of cell walls, the density of the cells everywhere proportional to the capacity for magnetic induction at the corresponding point of the other, and the magnitude and direction of the cells proportional to the magnetic force, then all the mechanic magnetic forces in the one system will be proportional to the forces in the other arising from the centrifugal force. And that's how they're doing this whole thing. So they're just pulling back the bow and arrow until they can get it to blast. The magnetic lines of force must surround electrified objects in closed loops. They can never end in space. Dielectric lines of force must always terminate in a counterspace, what J.J. Thomson calls intermolecular dimensions. The ratio of these two quantities must always equal the speed of light. Maxwell. They say the speed of light is a velocity. That's what Maxwell's saying here. Really, the speed of light is not a velocity. It's like Ken Wheeler says, it's a rate of propagation. It gets the hysteresis of the ether. So light really doesn't have a speed. So that's how this whole thing is working. It's going from something that has a wave and collapsing it, something that doesn't have a wave, dematerializing it, and then bringing it back into wave function to rematerialize it back out the other end. Pretty amazing. Everything's hidden in plain sight, but sometimes you just gotta go fishing for it and find the answers. Hope you like these videos, and we'll continue with other stuff that'll just continue to blow your mind. So thanks for watching. Have a good one.